All right. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you happen to be. And welcome to our Advice from the Experts webinar. I'm Richard Romano, managing editor of What They Think. And I know you were probably expecting Carrie Sherburne, but she had a personal issue come up and asked me to sit in for her. So hopefully there won't be a mad rush for the exits. At any rate, today we'll be looking at 5 keys to a successful Print MIS implementation. So I guess to start off, why is this important? Well, workflow optimization is important for all types of printing, but as production inkjet becomes faster and more flexible, workflow considerations become more complex. Flexibility opens the potential to run different types of work on the same device and the opportunity to run large jobs or turn a series of small jobs into a large job, amongst other concerns. So this session will discuss the top workflow factors for efficient operations. And joining me to take on the lion's share of the discussion are Richard Kuenhoven, President and COO of Hemlock Printing, Jan St. Laurent, IT Manager of Canada Ticket, and John Sharp, owner of Landmark Graphics. So thank you all for joining me. You can turn video on now. But before we dive in, just our usual housekeeping items. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. There is a Q&A box somewhere on your screen, so feel free to ask away, and we will attempt to answer it during the Q&A period at the end. And any questions we don't get to in this session, we will save and answer offline. And also, please use the Q&A box and not the chat box to keep my head from exploding. This session is also being recorded, and a complete archive, both slides and audio, should be available by the end of business today at whattheythink.com/webinars. Today's webinar is sponsored by Sabre Limited. Sabre Limited has been providing ERP services to small and medium manufacturing businesses for more than 20 years. Sabre is also PrintVis's most experienced North American partner, selling and implementing the PrintVis Print MIS since 2017. Their business is all about helping and consulting with small businesses to improve their organization and processes through better technology. Sabre focuses on Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central and PrintVis fixed fee implementations and training. They are the only PrintVis reseller in North America with PrintVis certified consultants. You can learn more at www.sabrelimited.com/printviz. And we thank Sabre Limited for sponsoring today's session. All right, so let's dive in. So selection and effective implementation of a Print MIS solution is arguably one of the most important decisions a printing business can make. And regardless, it's still certainly not a trivial decision or a trivial task. And that's why it's important to undertake this challenge from a position of knowledge, both about the current and desired states of your business and the options that are available in the marketplace. So in our session today, we'll hear from some experts on the front lines who will share their insight and experience relative to their recent MIS selection and their implementation experiences. So I guess let's meet our speakers. We are delighted to have with us today, as I mentioned earlier, Richard Kuenhoven, President and COO of Hemlock Printing, Jan St. Laurent, IT Manager for Canada Ticket, and John Sharp, owner of Landmark Graphics. So these companies operate in very different industry segments, but all three have recently installed the new Print MIS. And have been gracious enough to share their experiences and advice. So let's start by having each of you introduce yourselves and your companies. Richard, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks very much, Richard. So yeah, my name is Richard Kuenhoven, the president at Hemlock Printers. We're a family business, second generation, been in business for a little over 50 years, based in Burnaby, British Columbia, where it's currently raining heavily. And we are a commercial printer, doing a wide range of products. Heidelberg press room, we have Indigo presses on the digital side, and we are also in the wide format business. So printing in a wide range of products. And we also have a couple of sales offices in the US, one in San Francisco and the other in Seattle. So yeah, it's probably a Hemlock in a nutshell.
Cool. Jan?
Yeah, my name is Jan St. Laurent. I'm from Canada Ticket, and we're in the ticket tags and label manufacturing business. And company's been around since '79, but I've only been here for 15 years. And it's a small family-owned company and based in Langley, BC, not very far from Richards. And yeah, we implemented PrintVis just recently, and I'm in charge of I was in charge of implementation and nowadays development of the system, because the system is highly flexible and we have taken it on to customize it to our needs.
Great. And John?
Yeah, John, owner of Landmark Graphics. We are located in the San Francisco Bay Area and specialize in wide format printing for industries such as the vehicle industry, graphics, wraps, commercial, consumer, and then signage for retail or small, large businesses. And we also have an installation arm of our business. And then another arm is also in the racing side, where Landmark Graphics actually was founded in the racing industry.
Cool. Doing vehicle graphics, I presume, right?
Vehicle graphics, yeah, and race car wraps and graphics and decals, vintage restorations, things like that. Sort of a more fun part of the business.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we've also published, before we get started, we've also published an educational white paper on this topic written by Carrie Sherburne, which you can download from What They Think's white paper library. In addition to a discussion of Richard and Jan's experiences, Carrie also spoke with a couple of other executives from a couple of companies that weren't able to join us today. So we encourage you to download the white paper at your convenience, and I think it'll be a nice complement to this webinar. All right, so what are the 5 keys to a successful print ERP/MIS implementation? Well, Carrie identified 5 of them, and we're going to run through these in turn. The first is determine clear goals and objectives, do your due diligence, make sure you have adequate resources available, choose partners that are flexible and committed to collaboration, and above all, be patient. So again, we're going to go through each of these in turn, and our speakers will explain how they address them in their MIS projects and any challenges they faced, and they will explain how they overcame those challenges. So first of all, determine clear goals and objectives. So let's start with one of the drivers for undertaking an MIS implementation project, which, as we noted earlier, is not a trivial undertaking. So Richard, let's start with you. You had an existing MIS in place, so why did you seek to update or replace it?
Well, the system we had in place, we had implemented in 1999. So by the time 2010, 2011 sort of rolled around, we definitely started to feel we needed more. And that's when we started thinking about it. Of course, it took a long time to make that decision, but over the time, you build a wish list of things. The things that stood out the most for, just generally getting a more modern system was what we, for our staff that would be easy to use. But big ones are restaurant integration. So can we integrate our estimating and our job planning with our pre-press department? So can we build some automation there so that layouts and file uploads and things can be automated? And then can we automate some repetitive tasks like estimating, where we do a lot of the same kinds of product over and over again in a manual fashion? And then, are there other integration opportunities where information from our equipment is coming back to our scheduling system, or we're able to get really dynamic information that helps us with managing jobs as they go, or establishing standards more quickly around how we should price our products. So the goals, we have definitely had a list of goals. If I pick some themes, it would be around automation, integration, taking out redundancy, repeated actions, that kind of thing, which the current system that we were using was also not being supported anymore. So we definitely had to find a replacement. And moving it to a platform that we knew we could kind of build on.
Great. So now, Jan, your situation is pretty unique in terms of the requirements that you have. So tell us a little bit how you got started with this project. How did you go about deciding what you needed to accomplish? What were the steps you needed to automate, or how did that process begin?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear my name there. For us, that very, very similarly to Richard there, we were running a system that was implemented in early 2000, and I think they went live like January 2001 with that system. And I took it on when I started with the company to maintain it, manage it. And the company got acquired by EFI, actually acquired them. And then when they acquired them, they sort of shelved the product. It was called CRC Information System, and they stopped developing for it. And the system sort of would sort of bolt on together a bunch of parts like the estimating and the accounting. And it was meant for the printing industry, but it had a lot of flaws to it. So we were trying to find something else that would basically allow us to grow further. Like we've grown tremendously since we had acquired CRC till 2020 when we went live with PrintVis. But we wanted something that we could customize because we had done heavy customization with the previous system. They gave us a tiny little API that we could utilize and basically started making Windows application that would live on top of the database that CRC was providing. And we wanted to be able to continue to do that. So when we were looking for a system, we looked for something that we could customize that would have a decent API. And we weren't super picky about what the system was going to be, but it had to offer some estimating. We weren't just looking for a print specific system, but when we found, I had looked at Business Central years before, and then when we found PrintVis as an option, we're like, well, these guys have a bolt-on option for Business Central. Business Central is proven. There's 150,000 customers out there, I believe, probably 200 these days. And we wanted to be able to migrate our data and be able to have the 20 years of history that we had in CRC live in the system that we were going to bring in. And we were able to do that. And we're continually adding features so we can still present the data that we have in the old system in our new one. And I think that was the biggest one. And we wanted, obviously, like everybody else, to some of the goals to be as little as non-disruptive for the business as possible when we were going to make the transition. And obviously changing system, the screen looked different, but we wanted to make it so that the employees go from one system to another. There's just about the same fields that they have to fill in to get a job entered, or to create an estimate, or to print a piece of paper that's, you know, the job docket that goes into the shop. It needs to look the same. So we were trying to not copy the system because it's the wrong approach, but we wanted to make it as easy of a transition for our employees.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, whenever we talk about MIS implementations, we mostly talk about commercial print. Very rarely does wide format and display graphics come up. So, John, talk about your backstory, your MIS origin story. You know, as a display graphics wide format company, what were the challenges you needed to address, and what were your objectives with an MIS?
Our challenges were mainly surrounding growth and managing, estimating, and the financial flow of transactions, as well as data management, essentially customer relationship management. And a little bit of a backstory, the company was started in the 90s in the race car industry and literally just stayed in that industry until I bought it in 2014, and previous owner had died. And so when I took it over, I just knew that I didn't necessarily want to stay in that industry, but we quickly got into commercial graphics and fleet, commercial retail business graphics and fleet and vehicle graphics and things like that. And we just started to grow so quickly and realized that the systems that we had in place were not going to work for very long. We were running on QuickBooks, and it was very rudimentary. QuickBooks just can't handle anything like our industries need. And my concern was having something that would grow with the company. So when I chose the first MIS that we went with, I thought, yep, this is a good decision. And it turned out that they weren't willing to grow where we needed to go. And so I started looking around again. And after 2 years of being with them, we went live with PrintVis and Business Central. And the criteria again was what's going to be able to grow with us and be versatile and customizable. And so some of the challenges were basically just checking those boxes. Can the system do that? Can it get us from where we were with running off of basically an Excel style business operation to having a solid format of this is how we quote jobs, this is how we understand our costs, this is how we can understand our material consumption, consumables, inventory management, things like that. there's actually a lot that the system has taught me in how to run the business in terms of what it can do. I knew I had a vision for what I wanted, and then realizing more and more what the system can do as we've implemented it and used it has been even better. And I'm sure I drive Saber nuts with the amount of things that we want to change all the time, but that's the beauty of the system, is you can change it to tailor it to the needs. And so it's been really great in that regard.
All right, so that's the first step, determining your goals and objectives. The next is do your due diligence. So there are a lot of choices on the market for Print MIS, as you guys have experienced, a lot of suppliers. So I guess let's talk a little bit now about how you went about narrowing down the field. Richard, you were looking at this, I think, over the longest period of time, I gathered from the white paper. And I think you got pretty serious around Drupa 2016. So talk a little bit about the due diligence you guys did.
Yeah, so we actually, by the time 2016 rolled around, we'd already sort of taken a run at trying to pick a new MIS. That was the second time. And so the first time around, we actually hired a consultant who helped us with sort of a framework of assessment. And then we followed that formula the second time, because the system we had decided we were going to go with first time round got shut down. So they were purchased by a software or by an equipment company, and then they were shut down kind of without much notice. So we were kind of at the finish line. So we just shelved that project, and then we picked it up again. But basically the approach was, we organized a series of demos, which each department there would be a department representative, and they would rate the demos were specific to their department, and they would give ratings on a series of criteria. So we spent some time in advance figuring out what the criteria were for, say, an accounting person or someone in production planning, or an estimator or a scheduler. So we kind of had that all, and we rated them, and then we tabulated the ratings. And we did kind of that more of a pure approach, trying to come up with a grade for each system. And I think it was quite effective, because that allowed the organizer, I was steering that process, try to get me out of it, so that my bias, which of course I had my own biases, were not, at least trying not to influence the decision. And we ended up with sort of finalists, and then we went, through multiple. So we basically applied that exact same approach in 2015, 2016. By the time Drupa hit, we'd already kind of knew we were looking at sort of a couple of systems. And then when we were at Drupa, I was able to visit some shops in Europe who were running different systems. So at that stage, we were kind of in the, closing in on who we were going to go with. And I was able to see the system live in practice, which was a very big deal to see it actually in use, and for places that had been using them for years. So yeah, I think it's critical, and involvement of the staff who will be using the system, so they, you get their buy-in, is a really important part of it, depending on the size of the team. But in our case, we have 180 staff here in the Burnaby location, and everyone uses it. So we want to make sure doesn't feel like it's one person's decision, and then we force it on people. We want to make sure they know what we've done, and they know the recommendation, and they have some buy-in. Not that you're going to please everyone, but certainly we put a lot of effort into that upfront process.
Great. So Jan, I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but talk a little bit about how you winnowed down the choices, especially based on the complex workflow that you guys have and your unique requirements.
For us, I mean, when I started here, the system we had, obviously they had been using it for about 5 years, and I started looking right away when I started here. I was like, oh, what else is out there? Is there any other software? But it was always, I came down to that same decision where I was like, oh, it's not worth switching. We got demos over the years, maybe in 2010, I was looking and got a bunch of demos from different companies. Like, no, it's just not worth switching. The system we have is not that bad. But once they got acquired, we had to make a change, because now it was basically not going to grow with us anymore. And we, again, just like Richard, had a bunch of demos. We didn't involve a lot of people here. We're a smaller group of people. So management was involved, in a couple of key people for sure in in the company were involved in the process, but it was very heavily IT loaded, I would say, because I'm the one that's going to have to manage it. And I have or had other stuff with me at the time that was going to help me customize it. And we wanted something that was going to be flexible. But it had to be able to do the estimating portion of it, because that's a big part of PrintVis, I believe, is the estimating side of thing. So we wanted to make sure that was going to work. And as far as getting demos, we got at least 3 or 4 companies lined up. And some of it was right off the bat, it's not going to work. The company that had acquired CRC, which is EFI, they gave us a demo on their system. And one of them was web-based. They had another one that was Windows-based. And we were like, can we make this work? And we probably could have. But once I had to look at another piece of software in early 2010, I believe. It was running on Great Plains, but it was an Ontario company that was making a plugin for the printing industry, very, very similar to what PrintVis does for Business Central. And I'm looking for that one. I think Robert at Sabre contacted us out of the blue. I was like, oh, this is exactly what we need. And we sort of fell onto that business by luck, I would say, into their business. But we looked elsewhere for implementation, and being a Canadian company, we're like, well, we're going to have to go with Sabre. There's a couple of US companies that were also offering the implementation, and we were very happy to go with them as far as doing implementation for us, and making the decision to go with Business Central and Microsoft as the back end was a no-brainer for us because of what they have to offer, and the customization, and how many people are running on this system. Because often with big system like this, it's tested, and you don't have the sort of problem you have with smaller businesses or smaller software, let's call it, where you find bugs in their software, and then it takes a month before it gets fixed, or it just doesn't get fixed, and then tell you, here's the workaround. So there was a lot of thought put into it to say, well, this is going to be the right decision. I think we're still very, very happy with it, and I think it's going to grow with us for probably the next 20 years easily.
So John, I guess the same basic question. How did you sort out the options, especially given the specific nature of what you guys do?
Yeah, the wide format industry definitely is a lot different than the other print industries out there, and that became very apparent in our search for a system. There's very, very few options out there for wide format that we found that, when you really dig into it, are wide format friendly. And I know PrintVis has gone through some growing pains of their own, just tailoring it to our to the wide format need. It's definitely not a perfect solution for wide format, but that's also somewhat intentional because you can get into it and customize it, and we were willing to do that. Kind of to preface the conversation, we're probably the smallest company here. We're a company of about 9 people. We're way smaller than Microsoft would even suggest using a tool like this. And part of our, before I get into that, I guess, I have a vision for the company, and I had a vision at the time for where I wanted to go, and I didn't want to do this again, ever. I wanted to find a solution that would survive 9 people all the way up to 400, 500 people, just because that's where I want to take the company. And there aren't that many options out there. You can go to SAP or Oracle NetSuite and things like that, but they don't necessarily have a bolt-on module for printing, the print industry. And so it sort of narrowed the playing field. I'm also a longtime Microsoft user and sort of a Microsoft fan, I guess, in terms of I trust Microsoft's work ethic behind the products they produce. And I like their style when it comes to their business products. So there was a lot of trust that I put into Microsoft's product itself and Business Central, and I read reviews about it and other people's experience just with the product outside of PrintVis. And so we did some demos with for some other software that were wide format specific. Some were really, really good, but what we kept running into was they were going to offer what they offered, and that was the end of it. They weren't going to allow customization. They weren't going to consider the growth plan that we were on. At some point we would run out of room in the software essentially, and we would have to change again. So that kicked those to the curb immediately. Ironically, one of the biggest challenges we found when we reached out to PrintVis to look for a partner to implement with us, or to at least learn more about the software, we had several that didn't want to work with us because we were too small. They said, you don't want this product, you're too small. And they wouldn't catch the vision that I had and I was communicating. And so Rob at Sabre is awesome because he took the time to listen to me and took the time to understand, I see where John's wanting to go with this, and he's obviously willing to pay for it. But more than that, he's just willing to go through what it takes to get the software implemented. So that was probably one of the biggest hurdles we had, was a company of our size, just finding someone to implement it with us. Other challenges, as we mentioned, were just something wide format friendly. It's really a narrow playing field of who will support our industry. Quoting jobs in wide format is not easy. It's not, this is 3,500 business cards and it costs XYZ because it consumes this much paper. There's a lot of waste involved in our industry. There's the material comes on a big roll, so you have to figure that out, and how you're going to nest and quote and consume, and what's the finishing process like, and how's that going to nest, quote, consume, well, all of those challenges. And then you've got redos and mistakes or color matching and things that can consume a lot of time and material. That does overlap with the other print industries, but it just seems like an uphill battle to quote jobs accurately with wide format. Yeah, so I think that sort of rounds out the criteria we were looking for. Definitely something flexible, willing to grow with us, a partner willing to grow with us. And then we put a lot of trust in just Microsoft's product. Kind of like Jan said, we trusted what Microsoft were doing. We saw the track record with the software that they already had in place. We didn't know much about PrintVis. We did some demos, sort of tried to understand what it was, but to be honest, the demos are not wide format. They're all in the other print side. So there's no demo I ever saw for wide format. It was a complete leap of faith, trusting Rob and PrintVis to say, yeah, we can do it for you. Which was probably not the smart decision, but it turned out to be a good decision. Because smart decisions would be don't take a leap of faith, get all your ducks lined up in a row and go for, and then go forward from there. But that's not how I've run the business. We've taken a lot of leaps of faith.
We're the printing industry. When have we ever played it safe? Great. So a common theme that came up in the white paper, and a couple of you have touched on it already, is the idea of process integration. While the MIS is important, it's not as effective as a standalone system. Now, can each of you share your thoughts on the importance of being able to integrate other modules and or software to give you a complete end-to-end solution? And how important was that in your decision process? Richard, start back up with you.
Yeah, this is a massive part of the decision. So, the old system we used was a standalone kind of big calculator that was linked to an accounting system and yeah, did data collection and things like that, but no connectivity really, unless we layered something on top of it, we were pulling things out of it, but no connectivity to the other systems. And of course, as technology progressed, we heard a lot about JDF for years and years. And just integration in general all around, the smart print shop and all that stuff. And so in order to realize those things, you need a core operating system that's going to be able to connect those things, so like a bit of a hub. So that was definitely central to the whole goal of the new system. And then it's just, at that point, it just becomes, okay, what are the pieces of integration that are the highest value? And where should we put our effort in first? And even with the system that can do it, and suppliers like, say, we use Kodak, the Printergy side, or Heidelberg on the press room manager side, none of that stuff's plug and play. It all requires quite a bit of work to figure out how to make it happen, and we're still working on it. So we implemented PrintVis in 2019. We launched it, and yeah, we've got some wins, but we're still working on some bigger ones. And no, not pointing the finger at anyone. It's just once you get the system up and running, you got people trained, and you kind of get into it, then the integration pieces are kind of what you do in your next phases. So we're about to go live on a JDF, like a true JDF integration, where our production or our project managers, planners are picking layouts that are standardized layouts, and that's going to connect with Printergy template matching and being able to automate the and streamline the imposition process. And then that's going to create a whole bunch of downstream opportunities. So I think, you know, the big thing in our industry is how to automate, how to create really intelligent processes that use data. So that's at the core of a lot of the work that we're doing, and the opportunities are massive for the industry. So I think PrintVis is definitely a system that's enabling us to pursue those kinds of opportunities. And we are seeing a lot of support and collaboration by our suppliers to help us with that process as well.
Great. Jan, your thoughts?
Actually, I would be very curious about this JDF thing. I've heard about it, but we don't do any of that. We the only sort of integration we have, and it's interesting, like we had an accounting system bolted on, well, not bolted on, it was next to the other system, but we had a little bit of integration between the two to transfer invoices and things. But now we're like, well, let's get a system that can do it all. So it has the accounting built into it, so we can get more data out of it, because the other system we were using as our accounting system had its own proprietary database, and it was really hard to get data out of that system to create reporting for management, so that they can act upon, you know, the information that they can get out of it. What are the sales like? So we wanted to have something that was an all-in-one in one way, but also had the capability of integrating with other system. We built what we call the customer portal, which is basically a website for our customers that they can go on the website, they can see all their products that we store in inventory for them, and then they release them at their heart content. So that way they don't need to contact our staff. It's just basically a website, a shopping cart, but shopping cart, you don't have to pay for it. They've already paid ahead of time, or they'll just get billed on a net 30 basis. But that system was bolted on to the side of the system we had previously, and then now we had to transfer it over so that it would work with Business Central and PrintVis. And we were able to do that pretty easily because this system is pretty flexible. Since then, we've added a Shopify site to basically we redid our website on Shopify and then integrated it with Business Central as well. There's lots of plugins that you can pay for, but we're doing it all in-house so that we don't have this recurring monthly fee for all these plugins that these companies are trying to sell you. And there's some for Business Central, and there's also some for the Shopify side of thing. So we don't have to pay for those because we can print it or do it ourselves. And then we have a bunch of other APIs that we can use. And for those that don't know, APIs or application programming interface is basically for if you want to talk to FedEx, so you can get rate quotes. We can get rate quotes right out of our system. Again, you can buy a system that does it. Now we did it ourselves, so now we don't have to pay for it. And it's pretty straightforward. PrintVis comes up with a weight of what the job's going to weigh, and then the CSR customer service can go in there and say, what's my rate quote? How should I ship it? And if the customer's on the phone, they can get a price right there and then. So that's one of the small integration we did with them. Other carrier may not be as flexible as FedEx does as far as rate quoting, but if they don't have that, then they possibly can give you your rates in Excel, and you can import it into the system and do that. And then I think I touched on earlier, the other integration we really wanted to keep is the 20 years of data that we had from our previous system. And we were able, using, again, web APIs, we just talk to the database that stores all this information. So if you go to a customer that's in PrintVis, and you can see their history from the other system as well. And that is like, basically for us, it just allows you to act better on what the customers are asking. Customer calls in and is like, oh, my last order was 2 years ago. It's like, oh, it's not in the system. So now, we don't we turned off the other system completely, so we don't have to live in two systems, because we did that for the first year and it was like, oh, it's just too much work. So at least now it's all in one pane of glass. You just open up your system, you go to the customer and you click on one little tile and here's all your orders from the previous system. And yeah, so that sort of integration is amazing for us to be able to do that. And the reporting capability that's built into Business Central, and the graphs and all the data that's available to you if you know what to do with it. It's incredible.
John, what are some of your experiences with process integration, but modules where you're trying to get to talk to each other?
Sure. We're still baby stepping our way through all of this, but it was definitely a big component of why we chose Business Central and PrintVis. Some integrations that we are currently looking at, though, is an imposition tool for wide format. So again, quoting wide format is very tricky because it's not just a sheet of paper or a sheet of cardboard or what have you. If we have a wall that's 20 feet by 8 foot tall, how do we panel that job and how much material is it going to consume when we wrap it or print wallpaper for it? And so we're looking at an imposition tool to help us sort of manage, or so we're looking at several options for it to help us manage that and more accurately quote, this job will take 30 feet of material, print film, and 32 feet of laminate or something. And that will help. That'll basically be the last component that we would probably implement from a quoting standpoint that would make the quoting the most accurate it can be, rather than sort of a rough estimate for the wide format, because it is pretty tricky. There's so many different types of jobs that we quote on a daily basis, anything from a 3-inch sticker all the way up to wall wraps to vehicle graphics to we're currently wrapping a bunch of charging stations for a company for car chargers. And so it's how do you lay that out on a roll and what material does it take and what's the finishing process. Other integrations, though, for sure are, as has been mentioned, are shipping integrations. So we haven't yet done that. It's on our list of things to add. We are looking at, with some buy-in from a few clients, at some private customer portals where they create their own private shopping cart experience, sort of what Jan was discussing. We've been in discussions with a company in Michigan, and they already tie into Business Central directly. And the way we're using Business Central, it would work very well. We're just sort of waiting for the customer commitment. And that would allow us then to open up a shopping cart experience to other customers too, if we wanted. But the importance of the system being able to integrate was very high on our list. That was the sky's the limit type conversation. We don't want to ever get, this can't happen. We always want to get the answer of how can we get this done for you? And that's always been the way I've sort of run the business, is I don't ever want to hear I can't do it or we can't do it. I want to hear how can we do it? Because that's how growth happens. Otherwise, we're just going to stop growing and hit the status quo. So yeah, and there's other integrations too, like sales tax. Sales tax in the US is just a disaster. They've attacked it all wrong, I think. So there's companies like Avalara and things that we are looking at integrating with at some point that will help with all of that. Sales tax on its own is a full-time job when you get big enough. So Avalara would help reduce that. Yeah.
Now, there seem to be generally two camps when it comes to MIS implementations. Companies who have pretty much had the vendor just do everything involving the implementation, and then others who have tried to just go it alone themselves. But I gather the three of you chose a more collaborative approach with your partner vendor. So can you tell us why you think that's the best approach, and how you determine how many people and who within your organization would be involved in the project? I guess it's important to get a buy-in. But involving too many people can probably be problematic as well. So Richard, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we knew it was going to be a pretty lengthy implementation, just a lot of things to set up, all the cost centers, all the materials, sales reps and markups. I mean, it was a massive undertaking. And the people that were tasked with sort of leading the implementation had full-time jobs as it is. They were, running departments and things. So it just was not realistic to say, okay, you're going to implement this while doing your regular job. So we did bring in someone when we made the decision to go with PrintVis someone who in the industry who had a lot of experience working with setups of MIS systems in different roles. So we hired this individual as the ERP administrator role full time. And so when he started, that was his first thing, is to he actually went to Denmark and visited some shops and visited PrintVis, and this was early days. I think Sabre was just kind of coming on the scene a little bit, and then Sabre subsequently helped us out after that. So we had an in-house expert who was sort of the primary contact with PrintVis/Sabre, and then this in-house expert worked with the manager who was, who owned the implementation project. So yeah, we definitely put the resources on it. We knew it was going to be important. We also knew it was critical that we were successful with the implementation. And then at that point, we had weekly meetings with key stakeholders, and the main purpose of that weekly meeting was for the ERP administrator plus the manager who owned the project to update the stakeholders on where we were at on the implementation, and what things needed to get done by which group. So the idea there was to spread out the data collection and kind of all the things we had to do to implement it. Of course, we had some disagreements along the way. It was certainly some heads bumping there, here and there. And as well, I think when you go into it, you think you're going to just get it all done. And then, of course, about halfway through, it sort of turns into, okay, let's make sure we, get to the finish line and flip the switch, make it live, and maybe that thing we can do later, maybe that thing we can do later. And so, like integrations, for example, I think we wanted to have some of the integration stuff right out of the gates. And we've sort of said, okay, that's a phase 2 thing, and let's just get it going, which I think's proven to be successful. So yes, very resourced and prioritized. And it took us about 6 months longer than we thought. But the key was to make sure we went live and that people were trained and it wasn't a big shock, and that we felt confident in where we were going. So all in all, it went well, I think. And I think that's a credit to the stability and the depths of PrintVis that we were able to make that switch without it really being too problematic once we made the move.
Okay. So Jan, were your experiences any appreciably different?
Possibly. I mean, as far as when you're talking about resources, you're talking about people, right? And for us, we started right on with Sabre, and they told us to dedicate a certain amount of people in each department, like basically one person per department, who would be the person that's going to get trained, and they're going to train somebody, they're going to train the staff that are in their department. And because we're a very small team, there was probably 4 or 5 key people that were sitting on the training and basically taking all the information in, and then would have to reconvey this information to the rest of the staff. I would say, could we have done it better? Yeah, I think so. I think with more training, it could have been a little smoother for sure. But we were very lucky in the sense that business was down tremendously when we went live, because we went live June 2020, and people had plenty of time on their hand to learn the system, because they were not overloaded with work at that time. Business was down, like I just said, and they were able to learn it. I mean, people are still learning. Obviously, it's already been a year and almost a year and a half now, and obviously, yeah, people are still learning the system, and there's caveats and there's little things that we may not have foreseen in the beginning. The way the implementation was done, there was possibly could have been more discovery done ahead of time, so that we could, it's hard, it was really hard to see what the system could do before knowing what the system could do, you know what I mean? And it would have been possibly easier if we would have known more ahead of time of what PrintVis was capable and what PrintVis was not capable of doing. But the business is certainly recovered from the implementation, and everybody knows how to do their job with the new system. And I think training would be my number one thing, is train your staff before you go live, and don't try to replicate the system you had before. That's for sure. just adapt. You need to adapt to the new system. And obviously there's things that need to exist in there, but don't try to copy it. That's for sure.
John, anything to add?
Yeah, our experience is probably a far cry from Richard's because of our size, really. In terms of resources, we had nobody really to allocate. Rob didn't even ask the question at Sabre because he knew what the answer would be. There was nobody in the accounting department because I was the accounting department. There was nobody in the shipping department because I was the shipping department. You know, with a company of 9 people, there's only so many people available. And being the owner, I'm wearing a lot of the hats. And on the flip side of that, I think it's probably the perfect time to implement a system like this, because I'm sure the pains of implementing a system at a size of several hundred people is a lot greater than at a size of 9. Sure, it was exhausting and there's a lot to remember, and there was there's just things I had to let go of, like we're not going to get to that today. But now that it's here, as we grow, there's no more of this implementation that really has to occur, right? It's now just training. And to be transparent, we use the system every day, and it's our accounting system we use it for quoting and invoicing and inventory management. But we haven't actually officially finished rolling it out to our team just because of the lack of time resource that I had. And when I started this, I had somebody else help me, and they during COVID, we had to let them go, but we didn't bring anybody back. And we've slowly been sort of putting it into the workflow with the team in the digital format. So like a job ticket will get created and it goes into our workflow, sure, but in terms of insight into the system and using it to its fullest capabilities, I'm really the one that's using it fully right now while we finish implementing it. And that was just more the decision of what's possible. I don't have 9, 10, 15, 20 people to help me implement this. I have 1, maybe 2. And so let's let go of a lot of what we would like, and let's implement the raw requirements. And I don't regret it at all, because again, I had a vision for what this will do going forward. And I didn't want to do this again. Sure, I could have gone with a smaller, simpler solution, but 5 years from now, that simpler solution is not so great anymore. And then it's much more expensive, much more complicated to implement the solution like this. So yeah, it was a bit of a ride, and it was a lot of work, and we're still doing it, but it's been good. The time resource was the most challenging for us, for sure.
Great. All right, we're running a little low on time. We pretty much covered everything on this slide. Choose partners that are flexible and committed to collaborating. You've all pretty much described your experiences working with Sabre and PrintVis throughout. And I guess the final piece of advice is, just be patient. Implementing a new MIS is not a trivial task. It requires some degree of patience. So I guess just quickly talk about how you instilled that into your team, and what advice you have for our viewers, our attendees, about making sure things go smoothly and your staff doesn't get too frustrated at the process. Richard, I guess start us off.
Yeah, I think this relates to the partner previous slide as well, is that these things that don't happen overnight, they take quite a long time, some of the bigger things, and whether it's internal or through the partnerships. So I think the vision is key, and having that, making sure that the solution you're picking and the partner you're picking fit to your vision for the long term. So the stability of the system being on a Microsoft foundation. There was, and to a degree, there was an element of leap of faith in our case too, even though we tried to go all scientific on it. When it came down to it, we thought, okay, which partner do we feel comfortable with taking this journey with? And that was a key thing. So there's still that element of risk there. But then when going into it, setting your expectations so that it's not just, okay, when you flip the switch, all this has to be done. It's, get as far as you can when you flip the switch, and then keep in mind that some of the other bigger ones are going to take longer. The key is, with patience, is the dedication to getting it done, not letting go of some of your bigger goals. Because I think we found that with the last system, is we once we got it implemented, we kind of moved on with our lives, and we sort of didn't really pay attention to all the reporting opportunities or all the other things that we could have done. And all of a sudden, 12 years goes by and you're using it the same way that you did when you first launched it. So it's patience and a high degree of determination as well to make stuff happen, and push your partners. Like, we're not shy to push our suppliers or Sabre/PrintVis, say, hey, we need your help here and let's do it. And and it takes time, but we're definitely seeing some big wins as we go here.
John, any appreciable differences?
The big one for us that we've been doing is to keep the employees aware of what we're doing with the system. Is we just about every day we do release notes of changes that we apply to the system, so they can read them or not read them. Sometimes they're very technical. Sometimes we'll make sure to include who requested these features. We have a board system that we use called Trello, where if they send an email to support, it goes straight to there, and then we pick things out of this board that we implement on daily, weekly, monthly basis. We sort of like create, like, maybe this month we're going to focus on this. We'd like to get these features implemented, and keep the employees part of it. So that way, if my customer service is finding a bug, or they're finding something that's missing, or something that's not acting the way they expected, they can be part of the process of making the system better. And right now our boards is a little backed up because we're just about to roll version 17 of the software, because we started with 13 and we're switching over to 17 in the next couple of weeks. But as soon as 17 is implemented, then we're going to start rolling out new features again. It's just right now we're holding on features, just doing other things that are required. Let's think. But yeah, I mean, if you keep your team involved and they and be responsive to their demands, like, or their issues, because I mean, I get frustrated when people don't understand why the system doesn't work a certain way, but were they trained properly, right? And I guess it's for me to be more patient with them at this point.
Hey, John, anything to add?
Yeah, I really appreciate the perspective of Richard and Jan, and Richard in particular, the vision, and just making sure you don't forget where your goals were when you started the process, because it's easy to get tired and to get exhausted with the implementation process, I think. And pushing the vendors is important, pushing the partners, because they're not going to know what they don't know about what you want. And if I don't verbalize that, and I just hold a grudge or get upset about it, it's not their fault, right? Also, I think just a constant push for excellence. Ironically, Sabre has a program called Business Excellence, and it's kind of aptly named because I always think that we can do better at whatever it is we're doing, and I want to know how we can do that, and what it is that we can do in the software, in people, in any aspect of the business. So when it comes to this solution, it's how do we use the system, the tools, better for our day-to-day? How do we use it better for solving this problem or that problem? And if it doesn't currently exist, or we don't know how to use it, then we push the partner, hey, we do need your help to do this. I don't want to get the answer of it can't be done, right? I've already mentioned that. I want to know how we can do this, because that's why we signed up with this. And to Jan's point too, patience with people in the shop too, and with the vendors, with the partners. But right now, for example, our job tickets aren't exactly what my team want, and we're still changing them and updating them. And it's just a matter of, they have to understand the vision that I have. Why is it important that we have to wait for this? So we have to answer that question. They don't want to wait. They want the solution now. They want it to be the way they want it now. And to be able to listen to them and to understand their needs, and then show them, I'm working on this. This is the progress we're making. I think that's really important for any implementation, is to, if you don't get the team's buy-in, it's just not going to go well. They have to be a part of the process.
All right, and finally, I'm not going to go down, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go down the list. Did anybody need to hire new staff for their implementation? What kind of skills were you looking for when you were hiring? Anybody can jump right in.
We just hired the one person. Yeah, and then it was really after that it was spreading out responsibility, and so not a lot on that front.
I would say on our end, we didn't have to hire anybody, but I had to let go of a lot of tasks, the other task I was doing here, and focus on that.
I think now we're finding we need to hire people to help manage parts of the business process, especially as we've grown, but in terms of how the system gets used, specifically around inventory management and purchasing and receiving.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll make one comment on the IT side. We had someone that was doing crystal reports before, like doing a lot of crystal reports with PSI. And then we hired a new person whose title is workflow and data analyst. And they're basically largely a report person working in BI now, in Power BI, as well as Jet reports. And there's amazing amount of data, as Jan talked about there, like the speed at which we can get things now and create reports is awesome. But this person also does workflow mapping and kind of drawing out workflows and facilitating discussions with the other departments to help us really get to the goal, the bigger goal. And that's that point around patience and time. It takes a lot of time to kind of figure out exactly where you want to go on, say, a particular workflow. And then this role helps facilitate that, make that goal a little clearer for the, someone who's running a production department or something like that. So we do find that that's an added cost, but we feel there's a significant ROI there if it helps, us implement big workflow improvements in a timely fashion. Then the payback is definitely there.
Great. All right, we have a couple of minutes for questions, and we had a couple of questions come in. Let's see. How did you decide when it was time to switch? Where is that ROI point? Whoever wants to jump in and take these is welcome to do so.
I saw a couple questions on ROI. Like in our case, we didn't have a choice. We had to move to a new system. So there wasn't, the ROI is use a system that's like not being supported and really hurting your business long term. So, but in terms of like where were we focused in on savings, obviously, and it relates to this do more with less question too, is how do you grow your business without the pressure of hiring staff as your business grows, and how do you avoid having to add staff, or say if someone retires, maybe not replacing them. So we focus on estimating as one area. Can we automate a percentage of our estimates? And our target was to take 50% of our estimates that are being done by an estimator and have our sales rep do it based on just them putting the specs in. And we're at about 25 to 30% where we moved from manual quoting to automated quoting. So that's a big one. That's basically full-time sort of dedicated labor that you're able to transition to an automated process. So our ROI is more trying to pick off certain parts of the process that we can automate. And I would say it was not a perfect ROI. We just knew it was there. And then in terms of the budgeting of it, we just compared the cost of the other systems and made sure we were able to kind of incorporate that into our operating costs. But it wasn't really an option for us. It wasn't like, oh, the ROI is not there, we can't make this investment. It was a mandatory investment. It was just which direction were we going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the ROI for us, I think, was a few things. It was, we can't afford not to do this, right? As we grow, we know what we have isn't going to work. In our case, because we were coming from much smaller solutions or solutions that weren't growing with us. And the other part of that is lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Yeah, basically just picking off the individual problems and making sure we utilize the system for solving those problems. And that's where the ROI starts to develop, is how that process is now more streamlined. That process has less mistakes occurring in it. That process is sharing information more quickly, things like that. So it's hard to calculate, I think, for any of us, because there's no one number that we can point to and say, yep, that's the savings. There's a lot of time savings, there's a lot of process savings, mistake savings. Mistake savings could be $1, it could be tens of thousands of dollars from some information that was entered incorrectly in a system that doesn't audit data entry or something like that. So yeah, making sure the system can work to be accurate and to be a useful tool is where the ROI really happens. the ROI won't happen without the commitment to implementing it.
Okay. Let's see, cherry pick some of these here. So was web or cloud hosting a requirement? Why or why not? And is the data center on your country's soil a requirement for anybody?
And not for us, but oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, yes, for us on the soil requirement. So that's where an on-premise, even though we could go to a cloud solution that's also on Canadian soil, but yes, and yeah, we have the option to go to the cloud, but we haven't at this point.
Yeah, neither have we. We're just on premises. We had hardware that we bought just a couple of years prior, and everything is virtualized in our facility. So we're like, there's no point. And I don't think PrintVis was ready for us. Like Sabre could have hosted. They offer the hosting service, but we couldn't have done it as a SaaS when we went live. I think we can do it today, but we're not there yet. I think we're pretty happy with having it on premises. It gives us more flexibility, and for now anyway, and then maybe down the line.
We're currently on-prem, but with Sabre's servers, so it's not our premises. That was not a requirement for us. Didn't matter really where the server was hosted, as long as it was North America, quick data speeds. We had to figure out how to make the implementation simpler. We couldn't suddenly become an IT specialist in handling our own servers and things like that. The question was posed, but yeah, I'm switching to Business Central 17, 18 is going to put everything up in Azure's cloud. And I couldn't tell you where those servers are. I believe they're North America though. But yeah, we can't afford to hire somebody just to manage a server system at our size right now.
Thank you for watching our videos. Please follow our channel by clicking here to stay up to date with the latest content, or click here for more great videos. Don't forget to visit our website at sabrelimited.com. We look forward to seeing you next time.